Kangaroo Bluff was constructed around the same time as Alexander Battery, about 1883, and was to be one of the 12 permanent defence structures around Hobart that overlooked the River Derwent. Plans had been drawn up in the early 1870s due to the threat of 2 Russian warships sighted nearby. This threat was not realistic since Russian warships throughout the years had visited Hobart. However, within the context of history, Russia had become Britain's rival and the eastern threat became more looming than ever before. Much of Australia was caught up in the hype of including the Empire's rivals as serious threats against the Australian colonies. This was an imagined enemy based on their foreign Pacific policy and ties with the Empire. Kangaroo Bluff Battery had been considered as the perfect location in supporting Queen's Battery and Battery Point batteries. It had been considered since the 1840s, but financial issues and lack of initiative made the consideration for its construction slow. It was not until British troops began to leave Australian shores in the 1870s and the perceived Russian threat in 1873 that the construction began in earnest. The condemning of Battery Point's batteries in 1878 accelerated the construction and development of both Kangaroo and Alexander batteries. The colonies needed to be able to protect themselves, and the batteries and local military forces would provide that defence. The battery was planned by Colonel B.H. Scatchley, a British military engineer who was in charge of the construction of colonial defences. Excavations commenced in 1880, but by 1881 excessive cost caused the construction to halt in April of that year. Its development picked up again around the end of May 1883, and Patrick Croneland was contracted to construct the fortifications. This was in association with the Public Works Department. The erection of these fortifications was overseen by Bugden, a staff officer, and it was completed in 1884 at the cost of approximately $16,300. The labourers were paid 50 cents per day, but the construction did not stop there. By 1885, trespassing resulted in the digging of a deepened ditch and the walls to be raised with broken glass set in mortar. Keeping most trespassers out, it wasn't enough to prevent a 9-year-old boy in November of 1885 from drowning in the deepened ditch. This prompted a safety fence to be placed around the fortification. The structure was a pentagonal form of battery, fitting conveniently into the point of the bluff, jutting outwards towards the Derwent. The battery was surrounded by a moat and covered by a dry mound. Within the battery, tunnels and chambers were carved out of solid rock and then faced with masonry. The masonry stone blocks that were used in the construction were roughly 60 centimeters thick. The caponnes or capones were a covered passage. They jutted out along the length of the bluff and had rifle carved stone loopholes in order to prevent assaults by land party. They had cast iron hatchways. Other storage rooms were carved into the rock, 3 meter below the ramparts connecting 2 sides of the battery. They were used to store magazines, as lamp rooms, loading galleries, and a well. Additionally, communication tubes were set into the walls in order to promote combat efficiency. Similar to Alexandra, the ordnance came from Britain and were transported by ship, arriving in 1882. The cargo was 8-inch muzzled loading rifle Armstrong guns, weighing around 25.9 tonnes. It took a team of 13 horses to transport 1 cannon to Bell Reef Wharf and then to the battery. It could fire projectiles weighing 81.7 kilos, while the charge was only half of that. They were not mounted until 1884. In 1885, the battery received 2 additional rifle muzzle loading 8-pounders. They were positioned on each flank. They were converted smoothbore 64-pound cannons and were mounted using wooden carriages. Additionally, another emplacement was added in 1888. It was a small quick-fire Nordenfeldt gun. It was balanced on a pillar and could fire projectiles of 2.7 kilos. Provisions were also made to add a Nordenfeldt machine gun overlooking the bridge and protective ditch. Now the guns operated in the exactly same fashion as Alexander Battery. The initial method has been nicknamed the disappearing gun. Basically, the guns would be lowered down into the loading galleries, protecting the men while the cannon was reloaded. The cannon would be lowered onto a wooden rest, where the powder charge and shell were rammed into the muzzle via the rope hole. This was an ingenious but slow method. Barrels and cartridges were brought up from the stores by a conveyor belt system, basically hardwood rails and brass travellers. This method was superseded by men standing on the parapet and loading by a derrick fitted to the gun carriage. Charge and shell were loaded separately. The shells had studs that matched the rifling of the barrel, enhancing its accuracy through projectile spin, while the charges were silk bags and used in canisters. The recoil was restricted by a primitive device that worked on friction between interleaved plates that counteracted the excessive recoil. The battery was manned by defence volunteers, but only on selected days from 9 AM to 4 PM. On other days, Alexandra Battery was manned. They were used for training purposes such as annual camp drills and shelling practice. A more permanent group of artillerymen was formed in 1886, but it was later disbanded in 1904 when defence matters shifted to the federal government of the new Commonwealth. However, in the 1920s, the battery was abandoned and cannons buried. No shots were ever fired in anger.